Michal, Alex Piechocki, and Simon Olsen to join me on the stage.
Spanish keyboard. Sorry everyone, but I don't know how to use Spanish keyboard.
Please, chance join. Okay, do you have your phones in your hands? Are you connected to the internet? No? Sorry.
Take a seat.
Launched. As a warm-up, please follow the instructions. As a hint, 2015 September, the Bitcoin price approximately 200 euro. 2017 September, the Bitcoin price approximately 3,500 euro. When will I be able to buy my favorite Aventador for 4 Bitcoins, in your opinion? Got a few options. Use your phone to vote. Come on. Oh. You're really being nasty.
He needs paper and a pen.
Oh. Seriously? It's only the second child that I'm awaiting, so still not yet a van. And you can put a small child seat in the back of the Lambo, you know that, right? So. That's looking better, at least 2 people. Thank you. Thank you. Go on. Come on. Come on. All right. We will use that throughout the panel. What do we have? Third speaker. Is Mark here? Mark? No? I think he'll join us probably. All right. He's coming in. Gentlemen, let me just introduce to the panel. I will try to be a bit nasty as well, right? If you permit. We talked about trust. We chatted about this disruption of trust. And one of the questions that I would have first for you is, before we start, to share a few words about yourself and about your experiences in building this trust. You all come from cryptocurrency, Bitcoins, blockchains worlds. If you could, in a very, very short way, introduce your experiences, how are you contributing your organizations to building this trust? Would you like to start?
Yeah, I start? Okay. All right, so my name, I just introduced myself, right? And I explain where I'm coming from. So my name is Alex Piechocki, and I studied here at the ICADE, like almost 20 years ago. And I'm German-Spanish, and I believe that blockchain technology really offers a big competitive advantage for the European continent. And it's an opportunity that everyone should be taking up, I think, in the European space. And I think the European regulators have been doing a really good job in not intervening too much into this new technology, because it's very, very new and very, very unknown for the time being. And I think we should also follow the lead of the Japanese, because the Japanese have been really open-minded, and I think they have recognized that this is a big opportunity for Japan as an economy. And it's also a geopolitical tool in a sense because it has the potential to really change society in a big way. So what we've done in Spain for the time being, in that sense, is we published a book like 4 months ago that has become one of the top 10 bestsellers in Amazon Spain. And I think it's now in the 4th edition with 5,000 copies that have been distributed. And it has become really famous in the Spanish-speaking world in Spain and the whole of South America. And we're publishing it in other countries also at the same time. And at the same time, we're also building a Spanish blockchain community, which is called Blockchain España, which is where basically we're trying to create some of the key elements that are needed to kick off a blockchain community, which is traditional things like training, experiment with the technology, and collaborate on white papers, and try to create a basic community where you can really kick this off. And this is what I've been involved with for the time being in the blockchain space, but there are also many other initiatives in Spain and the Spanish-speaking world.
My name is Simon Olsen. I'm coming from Switzerland. I'm working for a company called RegTech, which is building a global exchange based on the blockchain. And in preparation for this panel and thinking about RegTech, I kind of took this as an opportunity to step back and try to reflect and to think, one, about the overall development, the imminent development which we see today, and one about the origin of the term and the origin of the thinking. And in my view, the fintech idea itself has big contradictions. And it's an idea which is very prevalent, but it's not an idea which has gone around the world and changed it. The imminent change from the blockchain, I believe, is far larger and the impact is far larger and far more dramatic for the financial system, for the economy, than anyone imagines today. It's probably larger than the internet. It might be like the Industrial Revolution. It's an exponential development that will have far, far-reaching implications. The doctrine RegTech to me comes from fintech, and fintech by nature assumes that finance is technological. If we say that finance is technological, we refer to a particular theory of money, which refers to that money has come from the exchange, is primarily a change, comes from the barter exchange, and you use it as an exchange. So you have commodity, money, commodity. And money has some value because it facilitates exchange. And if you assume this theory, then obviously money is primarily a function of a series of prices, and is by nature technical. Then we talk about high-frequency finance, high-frequency data, and so on. And it's very interesting, Nick Szabo, he wrote in his essay about the origin of money, he uses this interpretation. Obviously, this interpretation from a historical point of view is wrong. The real equation is money plus commodity equals more money, and the key driving force was credit and not the barter exchange. And I think if you assume that credit is the driving force, then trust is fundamental. And finance by nature is always political. So this doctrine of fintech, which has risen after 2008, part of it is peer-to-peer, trustless system, kind of replacing machines, humans by machines, algorithms. This is an illusion. This is an illusion and it's doomed to fail. It's a completely contradictory ideology which has come up after 2008, where you had this long kind of project which started in 1989, has failed. And we are in a moment of political decay, and finance without trust cannot work. Finance without the state cannot work.
Thank you. Mark?
Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Mark Sell. I spent the last 30 years working as a security consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers. My background is cryptography and biometric recognition and these type of things. Michal, thank you for asking me what I understood to be two questions essentially. Briefly say something about yourself. I think I did that. And then the second thing is, what could you contribute to discussion of trust? I love you for asking this question because it allows me to point out that I think it's the wrong question. I don't like trust. Have you ever come into this situation, you know, at a dark alley somewhere and somebody says, trust me? Well, usually that's the point in time that I'm wary and I say, wait a moment, is trust really something that I want? I don't like trust. I prefer trustworthiness. I'm also involved in a Horizon 2020 project about building trustworthy solutions. And I think we should make this distinction regardless whether we are talking about blockchains or RegTech or Bitcoins. I mean, trust is something subjective, which is, you could say, calibrated on context and on your understanding. And it's what you maybe base a subjective decision on. But what we actually are looking for when we try to build an ecosystem, it's a trustworthy ecosystem rather than a trusted ecosystem. The trust should be low. There is no reason, there should be a little reason to trust. There should be a high indication of trustworthiness. And it's with that philosophy, you could say, I guess one of the main reasons that brought me here is the gentleman who did one of the keynotes yesterday, Peter van den Hul of DG FISMA. He invited us to deliver a blockchain-based demonstrator for RegTech reporting. I'll be saying something more about that in the rapid fire. So that's where we try to build a trustworthy reporting system on the basis of blockchain and using the large plethora of existing regulatory reports. I guess I've exhausted my time by now, but
Mark, this is actually very good. I would like to build on your last comment, trust versus trustworthiness. We briefly touched on that with Bedru Shah during the previous presentation. I'll ask you to freely contribute to that, the subsequent question, which is basically, we are having extremely advanced mechanism proposed to build this, and I agree, trustworthiness. These mechanisms are far beyond comprehension of common user. I was referring to elliptical curves for zero-knowledge proof protocols. Try to explain it to your grandmother, right? And it's kind of challenging. It's kind of challenging. We are trying to, at the same time, build this trustworthiness and explain the grounds for this trustworthiness. This is data, algorithms, protocols, versus diversified cryptographic functions and so forth. Don't you see this a little bit of a big challenge that we are facing in building this trustworthiness in, for instance, the blockchain applications? And I compare it very often to things such as people's lack of trust in vaccines. There is enough data to prove that vaccines are good for the society. However, people's perception of that and perception of this data is different. So how do we try to overcome this issue? How do we try to build or convince users build this trustworthiness? We can start from this side and go this way, but freely contribute, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think if you look at trust and trustworthiness, there is a distinction. Usually it's in a setting of I have to make a decision. Shall I go for that vaccine or not, for example? Shall I board that plane or not? So that's a human decision. And there is also the context that a machine has to make a decision, because we are more and more seeing self-driving cars and so on. So let me first point out, let's limit ourselves for the time being to the human decision. And in that context, I think for a long time, trust has been studied by people like Deutsch and Gambetta, who explained that trust is something that helps you actually adjust to the complexity of society. Because, you know, I don't know very much about vaccines, but I know you for a while, and I see you give this vaccine to your children. I know my knowledge is limited, so I have to combine my own knowledge with the knowledge of some other people, and then I will take that decision. So in an ecosystem, that's why you see, for example, all of these recommender systems appear on the internet, because, well, in the end, it's capturing the decision. Somebody else also bought that book, booked that room, or whatever. And on the basis of the information you have and the trustworthiness signals you get from the renter of booking.com or whatever, combined with what you can accept to be your own limitations and you enrich it what you get from other people, then you can, in the end, make a kind of evidence-based, reasonable decision. That's also the approach we take in this Horizon 2020 project, that it should be evidence-based as much as possible, and semantics is a big part of it, because you take the word trust, you Google the meaning of trust, and you will find, I don't know how many thousands or 10,000s of hits, but it's a very interesting and broad topic. So I think essentially you can look at trust and trustworthiness in the narrow way. Is this cryptographic algorithm, is this hardware trustworthy or not? But that's definitely not enough if you operate in the real world. There you have to look at it from the cultural or the sociological, economical components as well. That's what makes it interesting but hard. So if you look at the blockchain, for example, when you look at the crypto in the blockchain, that's fairly well understood cryptography. I mean, there's really not much, there are no new algorithms. It's an interesting way of putting it together. So the fact that there is no centralized decision point anymore, then I hear people say, well, this is a trustless model. Well, forget it. You trust every node that the code is not being tampered with, and you trust that there is no backdoor, so all the nodes are actually changed by some kind of virus, because if the majority of the nodes are changed, your trustless infrastructure is hijacked. So I don't buy that this is like trustless or whatever. It's just another model. It's a consensus model. But maybe I should stop here and pass the word on.
You know, to me, it's always difficult to figure out what is actually going on. And, you know, the American foreign minister asked the Chinese foreign minister, Zhou Enlai, what have been the consequences of the French Revolution? And he said it's too early to tell. But, you know, nevertheless, I would like to try to tell you how I see it and what there has been. So, look, a Bitcoin, the advantage of this Bitcoin thing is that you can send a Bitcoin from one person to one another, and the other person receives it immediately. Okay? And this is a complete ingenious invention. This is an invention of historic dimension. If you go back to what finance is, and has a revolutionary impact on the transaction costs, revolutionary, like the Industrial Revolution, and transaction costs are fundamental to the economy. If we go back to what is finance all about, Rothschild said, you know, the job of a banker is to bring money from point A where it is to point B where it is needed. And so it's rather clear that, you know, if you can send a Bitcoin from point A where it is to point B, eventually you can take a dust of Bitcoin and you can attach to it a contract, an IOU, a bond, an equity and move it from point A where it is to point B where it's needed. The ledger, the blockchain ledger, creates trust because you write down that it's a global ledger and it's a global notary system. So this is a major step, okay, that you can write down who belongs to whom. It's like the notary system. So it's absolutely fundamental. The problem obviously is that if you have a real asset which you attach to a Bitcoin, you still need to keep this asset somewhere. This asset needs to be somewhere. There needs to be some legal contract attached to a colored coin or to a token, which gives you a legal right to sue for the underlying, and the underlying needs to be kept somewhere so that you will get it if you sue for it. So this is fundamental. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You know, the Bitcoin as itself, if you just move the Bitcoin or the Bitcoin dust, you know, it doesn't work. You still need to have this point of trust. Now, in reality, what I see is that the implications of this are completely different. What you see already is that the way people are investing is changing, completely changing. They invest widely, and companies have thousands of investors instead of hundreds. You cut out. You have price discovery. You can diversify with small amounts. This has lowered market entry costs for companies, and it poses a lot of new questions. How do you do the accounting of a company? Do you do it in your own equity? You can pay your employees in your own equity. You can. The company I work for, we created a colored coin as a use case, which is a forward underrun according to Swiss law. For a perpetual forward for a Swiss equity. It's a security of the Swiss law. It's approved by the FINMA. And we launched it as a use case. We now have 4,000 individual investors who bought our coin. We pay some of our employees in coins. I get paid in coins. And you wonder, how do you do the accounting? Should you do it in Swiss francs? Or should you do it in Leica coins, which is a forward on the run to our equity? Probably. So if you can pay with your own equity, the more you can pay with your own equity, it's actually credit. You know, credit is fundamental to building a business. Credit is the driving force of everything. If there is more credit, the economy will grow more. So I believe that the impact of the blockchain will be far, far quicker and far more dramatic than anyone can ever imagine.
So, thank you. I'll actually bring it up to the next time I meet the International Accounting Standards Board. I'll bring it up whether we can account like a coin. Alex?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of confusion in the market and about what a cryptocurrency is. I think Satoshi Nakamoto, when he did build Bitcoin, he did create it as an alternative to fiat money. I mean, with fiat money, I mean euros and the dollar, and etc. And he basically wanted to create a money without central banks and commercial banks that allowed people to interact between themselves. And that's something that might be very questionable if some governments or central banks want that. But I think what is really interesting about this is that was the first wave. And what we've seen after that is the second wave, like with Ethereum, which is a smart contract blockchain platform, and the other waves of blockchains where they're trying to do other things. And I think it's really dangerous to mix all these concepts, because something that has been created to act as a digital money, or as a digital peer-to-peer money, does not to be applied to everything else. And what is happening in the market right now is people are calling everything crypto something, which is not really crypto something. In reality, you have a token economy. And as part of this token economy, there are all kind of different aspects to it, and it's really dangerous to put it all into the same pot, from my point of view. And Satoshi Nakamoto, what he wanted to do, and what other people are also trying to do, and I think that's the genius that Satoshi Nakamoto started with, is create a trustless system where you basically could interact with anyone in the rest of the world without having to rely on a centralized party. And that's a really great thing, because as history has proven, centralized parties for some critical transactions can be really, sometimes cannot be trusted. So you can trust a network instead of having to trust a single party. And there's another aspect to this, which I think, following up on what you just said, is I think even without Bitcoin, I think the nature of money will change dramatically over the next 30, 40, 50 years. And money as we know it today is a very new invention in reality. And if we take the whole history of humankind, and what I see in the future, it's something that's called, that's labeled very often as tokenomics or cryptonomics, is that in reality, in the future, as we combine big data, artificial intelligence, blockchain technologies, and other technologies that maybe we don't know about yet, we might create a situation where we have a situation of hyperliquidity, where you can convert any asset into something very similar that is very similar to money. And then the question will be, do I really need money to do an exchange? And the question might be in the future that you don't need that, because you might have a share of a Telefonica, and that Telefonica might be liquid in the market directly because there's a market price that you can directly exchange, because the settlement systems, the payment systems will allow that to create that kind of economy. And that's a big question, because as money is a political tool also, and how do we organize society? So, and that's what makes blockchain so important to understand, and also makes it really important to not to regulate it in an aggressive way, because you can kill the invention if you do that. And that's why I think we should follow the Japanese path, because I think Japan and Singapore are really showing the way, or the city of London, because they're understanding, okay, if I want to maintain my competitive advantage in the global financial market as I've done in the last 200 years, I need to be on the cutting edge of the future of technology and finance. And they're creating a very favorable environment. And we in Europe, we're losing out because we haven't done anything yet to create a favorable environment in this kind of technology, where the Japanese, the Singapore, and the British, they've done that. So I think the combination of all those kind of things is really like about something that is, from my point of view, critical nature for the European continent.
Thank you. If I might, I'll be this nasty, mean person here to ask you more difficult questions, because we've heard from Badger before, and around a month ago, I met with MAS in Singapore, and they were sharing some concerns, some challenges related to blockchain. They were talking about blockchain not actually being matched with the use cases, with the user requirements, but rather than that tested in all these different possible fields, and the hype for the blockchain and so forth. Can I ask you to very quickly pinpoint 3 key challenges that you see related to the blockchain going forward? If we look a little bit towards the future, what do you think are the biggest, so to say, challenges? Let's start with Alex here.
I think the expectations are too high from what blockchain can do in the short term, and I think the technology will not be able to deliver on the short term, even though the long-term impact might be very high. And I think that will create a mismatch between expectations and the capacity of delivering. And all blockchain technologies, it doesn't matter if it's public blockchains or private blockchains, they're very immature for the time being, which is not a bad thing. It's just such a new thing that we all need to learn about how to use it. And I think what was also very difficult is that if you apply traditional mental models to something that is completely new, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, it's like a friend of mine, he tends to say, I mean, it wasn't the candle industry that created the light bulbs, just because they didn't like improve over time candles and they say, oh, now I do the light bulb. No, it was a complete disruption of the candle industry, and then they created the light bulb. And you have plenty of other examples. And I think in this situation, we're in the same situation. We cannot just use the same traditional mental models, which is something I'm seeing all the time. And we just need to come in, say, and think, I know nothing. Let me understand how this works, and let me see what I can do with it. And instead of trying to think about what applications can I do, is try to understand the technology, and just by the understanding from the technology, you will have ideas about what kind of applications will come up. And that's something that I'm not seeing too much today.
Simon.
Okay, look, I think there's two tales here about regulation. I mean, if you look at what is happening currently with ICOs being launched, I think it's like thousands. It's like 10 every day, or and I get many emails every day about ICOs. They all look the same. They all are the same, more or less. it's some kind of creative idea where you try to sell people things which are worth nothing for something. And you see, in an investment, you give cash now to receive cash flows in the future. So if somebody sells you something where you're not going to get anything, that cannot be right. The regulator will close this. And this will close, and clearly the people who do it in bad faith. They do it in bad faith. Why do I say this? They're separating structures from their existing structure. They create a foundation, another company, because they want to break the legal connects. So to me, it's clear that this whole ICO bubble, it's like a tulip bubble where people do the token bubble or the code bubble, where people have no rights to nothing. They have no rights to nothing, and this will end on one day, and it will be over. And I think the regulator has given very good guidance in the DAO ruling. I encourage everyone to read the DAO ruling. It's an excellent reading on the blockchain. I think it explains a lot. It explains a lot how securities laws will be interpreted on the blockchain. I mean, if you read the People's Bank of China statement, you have the impression that a lot of these things were sold in China, where a lot of white papers are written in Chinese. I mean, to me, it's a clear. I'm very clear on that. However, I think the regulators is what you said. The regulators should not block the development of the blockchain. They cannot. If they do that, they will make that the financial center will move elsewhere. They will create a new Luxembourg. So far you cannot see that regulators are taking these positions. I don't have the impression that Switzerland the FINMA is very open, Liechtenstein is very open. I have the impression that regulators are open to blockchain solution. We described the entire system of our company to the FINMA in great detail. We have a dialogue with the FINMA. We explained them how we settle on-chain, how we settle off-chain, how the colored coin works, how the contract works. So we're very, and we believe that the regulator is taking a good position. You know, these sandboxes or fintech initiatives, to me, look, they are pilot projects. They're a little bit like they're like projects to be bought by Banco Santander or something, which you do as an experiment in a lab, and then you can to see how it goes. I think that, you know, the development here is so fast that, you know, we're growing, at the moment we're growing clients tenfold in the last 10 months. And we're not even regulated yet. I mean, to me, I see that we are at the beginning of an exponential curve. You know, your bank account, your custodian is going to be your wallet. This is the future, and this is not the future in 10 years. This is the imminent future, you know. And so the question, this has far-reaching questions for banks, for example, because currently a bank is in a very strong position because it's a centralized counterparty. You know, very few, even Swiss pension funds have a centralized custodian and a centralized counterparty. And that's why, for example, there's not a single fee at UBS which is the same. There's no one pays the same fee as one another. They're all confidential. They're all so good that you're not allowed to tell it to anyone else. It's always according to the relationship. So the business of a UBS is so good because you're the centralized counterparty. You do the lending, you do the custody. If this disappears and you have it on the blockchain, so everyone will have a professional cash management, for example. But this is just, you know, one angle. But look, there is no point. Karl Marx said the tragedy of history. There's no point to try not to go it. In my view, the development is so dramatic that there is no point in trying to resist it.
Mark, what would be your view on the challenges, the key challenges for blockchain going forward?
I think these are, in the first place, scalability. We do many blockchains now, but the world's a big place. And when you see some of the larger crypto, let's say, crypto functionalities used in the world, the ICAO-based passport system, the International Civil Aviation Authority organization. We have a worldwide system where you can travel, show your passport, and essentially part of why your passport can be validated is based on traditional public-private key cryptography that's been built, it's established worldwide, and there are quite a few billion people in this universe. Blockchains are, in that respect, I think, still usually smaller, and we have to see how well they will scale. That's the first one. The second one, I think, is performance. When you look at, I hear very often now the term Bitcoin here, the last minute, so to speak. Bitcoin's about payments. If you simply compare the throughput of the Visa network versus the throughput of the Bitcoin network, I know there is a new derivative, the Bitcoin Cash, and they are working on it, but they are nowhere near the performance that the existing payment networks already have. Not to mention the energy cost. There's a very funny article by some, I think it's an Irish researcher who calculated roughly how much energy is devoted to blockchain, and I think it's like in 1 day of blockchain consumption corresponds to the electricity consumption of the country of Ireland or something. So you could say this is disproportionate. That will probably not continue. And then the third problem is the cash out problem. I mean, it's fine. We can both share some colored coin, but there's only so much we can do with that colored coin within the colored coin community. At a certain point in time, you want to convert it into some other form of asset. Because there are big distinctions. I mean, you have blockchain solutions where the asset resides on chain, and Bitcoin, the asset, the coin resides on the chain. There are a whole lot of other series where the asset really is represented by something on the chain, but the real asset lives off chain. The real asset is a diamond, and what you are trading is the right on the diamond or the authenticity of the diamond. So the balance between to what extent is the system trustworthy when we go off chain, I think that's also something that we will have to learn over time. And I like the example that was given by you about, let's think about how will payments be done in the future with colored coins or whatever. One of the joys of working in security for a while is that you come across many solutions. And for many, many years in Africa, there is a payment system which is called M-Pesa, mobile Pesa. Pesa is the Swahili word for something that weighs something. It's money. And M-Pesa was essentially an SMS-based payment system. Very, very low cost. So you could go in rural Africa, small village, you can buy whatever you liked. For white folks like me, that's usually gasoline and food and things like that. And you can pay with just sending an SMS. At the cashier of the supermarket, there is a sign of the account, the M-Pesa account that you have to pay to, and it takes like 3 or 4 seconds. You send an SMS, and then it's interesting because originally they launched the value was the same as the national money. But very quickly, apparently, people found a way, the preferred way to pay with M-Pesa is by paying in airtime, because airtime is something that they all need to make calls. And it was cheaper, the cost of transaction to passing on airtime from me to you is cheaper than paying some rands or whatever money is local in that country. So the creativity of people of finding ways to pay, I mean, airtime in that sense was in M-Pesa a long time predecessor for the Bitcoin, but it's embraced at large scale in Latin America and in some African countries. So the creativity of people is one of the best sides, I think. Did I answer your question?
I think yes. To at least the first part was really referring to the challenges. If you want to take a look back on the screen, you will see what the audience found out to be some of the challenges. And I apologize because some of these are pre-described, so to say. They will not match the ones that you mentioned. But if you want to offer any comments on the data, by the way, if anyone from the audience wants to still vote, it is open. So as you can see, thank you, Radek. So as you can see, there is still a bit related to other, which I would say that probably some of them at least refer to the challenges that you did mention. There is a large chunk related to trust, aka trustworthiness, which we could probably, for the sake of simplicity, treat together here. There is a bit on the business problem, the mismatch on the business problem. I would say that maybe one or two people of the voting people highlighted that. Proliferation of the consensus mechanisms, similar. Need of collaboration and lack of data standardization was treated as a very, very, so to say, not really particularly relevant challenge in the context of ecosystems. Any very, very short comments on this data that you can see from the audience?
Could I mismatch with business problems? Well, you know, I'm quite often speaking with people from industrial businesses or insurance companies or reinsurance companies, and usually they have a blockchain expert and their team there, a senior management team, and they're trying to figure out how blockchain can help their business. So usually you really have to look at this in great detail. I mean, to give you an example where the blockchain can come in, just one example. Okay, very, very large industrial corporation. I cannot say the names, but one of the large one has a large receivables story, large financial unit where they fund all sorts of industrial projects. So if they can trade these receivables, if they can sell them on to someone else, this is a huge, huge, huge advantage for them. I mean, the advantage for them is enormous. Or, I'll give you another example. You mentioned very interesting examples from the air industries. There's a lot of problems between airlines because one person books a ticket with this airline and then with another, and the whole kind of settlement of transactions between the different airlines is very complicated. This is governed by IATA. So IATA calculated the savings, which they would have, are tremendous if they would have a kind of way of mechanism of settlement on the blockchain. So I believe that the impact on the business is huge. For example, the United Nations has made an RFI to bring humanitarian assistance onto the blockchain, like just to request information. And so on. So I believe that there is a huge, huge opportunity there, and I believe that I don't really see the mismatch. I see a perfect match. I believe it's just people are trying to figure out step by step, and they realize just where it helps them.
Thank you, Simon. I think that we are running a little bit of out of time, and the next panel is on. Let me ask you for one final question and very short yet very important response. Your vision, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the key point that you want to pass to the audience. And to make it a bit more challenging, we're going to ask the audience to be your investors panel and judge your responses. Pick the ones that they will like the most, they will agree most with. So think about what in terms of the RegTech, and particularly we focus on the blockchain, what in 10 years, 20 years will happen, how would you like to convince the audience to vote for your opinion? Mark?
Could I reflect a little bit more? I'm not sure I understand the question entirely.
So we focused the Todi conference around 10 plus 20 years horizon for the RegTech. What do you think will happen within the blockchain application of that, the application of the technologies, the RegTech, within this 10 plus 12, 20 plus year horizon? John Turner gave a bit of a vision yesterday about that, with a time warp that he imagined going to 2032 and looking back at what happened in the past years. What would be your comment, so to say?
Well, then I think blockchain and DLTs are here to stay. By the way, the Estonians, who are a reasonably advanced country, they've been running hash tree based timestamping services like for 10 years or so. And they're among the top timestamping providers functionality in the world. And I think that's what you're going to be seeing here in the RegTech. In a number of use cases where there is a need to have multiple writers who have to declare something, commit to something, and there might be a kind of mutual distrust or competitive position between them, which merits that there is no real central authority. In these use cases, I think blockchain is here to stay. And as younger people learn more about cryptography, because I'm quite impressed by the response from the audience. The trust in the advanced crypto. I mean, for me, there is no advanced crypto in Bitcoin or blockchain. It's old school crypto. The really advanced crypto, that's the crypto that we briefly discussed. That's the post-quantum crypto. That's the 5G crypto. That's advanced crypto. But that's just society which has to come to terms with the state of the art. And I'm familiar in that field, and I absolutely have zero knowledge in medical technology. I mean, and in medical technology, I'm a nitwit. So the only way to deal with this is by working together, I guess. So the short summary is, I think it's there to stay, and there will be a number of use cases where it's going to be highly relevant. If you have multiple writers, consensus, and some kind of competitive position, mutual distrust. You don't want to disclose everything, but you need to have a firm commitment to something, and there it will thrive for the next 10 years.
Thank you. Simon? Very briefly, because we are eating from another panel.
There's been a report about the state of the financial system for the French president very recently by a senator. And the report said that a financial crisis was not on the horizon. But the big risk was a political crisis. It was the repressive, the kind of rise of nationalism, the rise of decay, which you have in many places. You have it in Hungary, you have it in so we are really in a situation very similar to in the Jackson period, before just 30 years before the civil war in the United States. This we have to take extremely seriously. We have to focus on the main thing. We have to try to work together and always keep the human, the man, in the center, not the machine. Code is not law. We should never forget the humans, and we should try to not make a compromise and not think about profit, not think about financial gain, because we live through a unique time with unique opportunities to make this world better, to protect the environment, to get people out of poverty. We, because we work in this field, have an ethical imperative to do our profession according to the merits of what we see, according to the merit of what is real, according to the merit of what is there. And that, I think, is what we have to do.
Alex?
Yeah, I think in the coming 10, 20 years, if Europe uses its cards intelligently, we have an opportunity to overcome some of the growth challenges we have, and I think that blockchain technology will be one of those, and I think it's here to stay, and if we play our cards right, Europe will be part of that future.
Right, quick vote. Which vision do you buy into? Who convinced you?
No conviction.
All right, okay, we're coming. Equal pace, a bit of a race. Mark, Simon, Alex, okay, equal again. All right, so we have more people in the room.
Is there a prize?
I was thinking about it, but Simon's a little bit ahead. Give it a few more votes. Let's try to get to maybe 20, 25. It's fairly balanced, I have to say. So I think it's a good signal for the panelists to say that all of these comments were relevant and were found interesting. With that, I would like to thank very much our panelists, Alex Piechocki, Simon Olsen, Michal. Thank you very much. Our next panel is led by Javier.